back to another episode of the Young, Dumb, and Woke podcast. Today, I have my first in-person interview, so if you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify, I encourage you to go to the YouTube, which will be in the description, and watch it live because Mr. Scott Cook, who I had a conversation with today, graciously allowed me to use his podcast studio, and we had a really fantastic conversation in person, which was a whole lot of fun. Scott is an amazing guy. I'll let you find out in the episode how we met, but he is an entrepreneur, and we really dig into the nitty-gritty details of his story, which is extremely powerful. We go into things like addiction and ego reduction and why discipline is the key to overcoming those things. We talk about Scott's entrepreneurship journey, his morning routines, what recovery looks like, and as always, seems to be a theme in these conversations, which I love, a lot of honesty and vulnerability. Scott said in the episode that he would title it Meet Scott Cook, the Epic Disaster. But as you'll see, Scott is the very opposite of an epic disaster. He has so much wisdom and current and ongoing redemption, and he's so open and honest. And I really think his story will affect many, many people's lives as it has mine. So thank you so much for listening. And don't forget to leave a 5-star review and like and subscribe on YouTube.
So I really like music. I could, it's like when I've tried to learn legitimate music theory, I always feel stupid. It's like I've done it incorrect for so long. It's the same with piano. Like I can play things like I was with some guys the other day. They're like, "Oh, please, like play this tune," I'm doing my thing. Yeah, and I can do it.
So you can do it by ear.
I can do it by ear, but I couldn't tell you what I'm playing.
That's like I feel like way more rare though.
Maybe, but
I wish I could do that.
Well, that has its downsides though, because then when you actually have to do something the right way, you don't know how to do it, which is you know what I mean.
Do you think that love stemmed from the fact that your brother could, though? Like, you wanted to beat him? Or is it just like, no, I love music?
No, I just really have always liked music. I connect emotionally with music differently.
I'm the exact same.
Like, I don't cry for a lot of things. I cry for, like Air Bud. You know, I cry in that kind of a mood, you know, like a heartfelt thing. But especially when there's music in it. We just went to the symphony over the weekend. And John Williams did he was a composer for like Jurassic Park and Harry Potter and some of those guys. And so the Spokane Symphony puts together kind of John Williams is 90 years old today, or not today, sometime coming up here. And so they're doing basically just a tribute to John Williams. So I was, we're listening through this, and a song comes up from the movie Hook, which came out before you were even born.
Yeah.
Have you already seen it?
No, I haven't seen it.
So came out with, and it's just like, you know, for anybody who's like heard Hook, you know, or seen the movie Hook, you know, it's like.
Are you talking about like Captain Hook?
Captain Hook, like.
Okay, because I've heard, I was just making sure.
It's like the best of the best, you know, like Robin Williams, you know. Anyway, so, but the song comes on of like one of I think it's like The Flight to Neverland or something like that. And it's a song that anybody who's seen the movie would know the song. But I'm like sitting there, you know, everyone's like, you know, just kind of chilling in the, and I'm like sobbing, you know, I'm crying. And my wife's like, what are you feeling, you know? And I think for me, growing up, I got in trouble a lot as a kid. So I'm a middle child. There's just a little backstory. There's 5 of us. 5 kids. I'm the middle child. So like, here's the things that I had, you know, like little like stigmas that people place on people. I'm a third born.
Okay.
I'm a middle child. I'm a pastor's kid. I'm a missionary's kid.
Oh, you've got it.
So I've got them all.
You've got the list.
Yeah. So I was destined to go to jail a long time ago. But I was in trouble a lot as a kid. I did a lot of stupid things. And, but when I would get sent to my room, I had this boombox in my room, and you know, this is like when CDs were a thing, right? So I would listen to music, and my first CD I ever asked for was a Braveheart album. Like what, you know, like because Braveheart the movie is pretty epic, right? It probably came out before you were born, but like
I've seen that one though.
But it's a good one, right?
It's
a classic. It's a good one. But the music behind the scenes is just like really epic to me. And there's something about a melody that tugs at my heart that somehow pulls emotion out where other areas of life don't. And I think it's because music was always a safe place for me. And so it's weird that it comes out in that form or fashion, but like most of life has been an unsafe place for me. But music has always been a place where I could go and be, and like there's no judgment. Music is what it is. It's very fun. It's just, you know.
I think a lot of people probably feel the same way.
Yeah.
Music, like there is something, I feel exactly the same way, that there's something almost spiritual about music that takes me to a different place. Like when people ask me, when do you feel closest to God? And there's multiple ways, but the first thing that pops into my mind is music.
Yeah.
There's something about, specifically for me, walking and listening to music that I feel so connected to my spiritual self. And maybe it's the safety and the sounds and how it was all created.
Yeah.
I want you to go a little more into why you said you didn't feel safe as a kid and music was a safe place. Why did you not feel safe?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we're all byproducts in some ways of kind of, there's genetic things that we're built with, and then there's experiential things that we dealt with as kids. And, you know, most of us, I think, myself, I'm definitely this way. Like I'm a living byproduct of the way that my parents raised me, the things that happened around me, the kind of the functions of life. And, you know, I think my dad, I hate to like bash him on air or whatever, but like, you know, my dad just, when he was scared of things, it translated to anger.
Yeah.
Which I do today as somewhat of a reflection of what I learned, but also I think there's some like anatomical stuff to that. But like, you know, and so I was often doing stupid things. Like I was doing the fearful things. So equals my dad being angry a lot. And I think my dad, he'd lose his cool more than he'd care to admit. And we don't need to like air out his dirty laundry on air.
No, but
like,
I mean, I've found parents often are doing their best, and it's an unhealed trauma from their parents, and it's just a trauma line.
Yeah, and so like, you know, this you know, I come from a Christian background, and so that's just like one, you know, I understand there's different belief systems, but there's this concept of generational sin, if you will, which just makes a lot of sense, even if you didn't subscribe in the religious world, right? You inherit a lot of stuff because you experienced a lot of stuff.
Totally.
And like when you're, you know, 0 to 7, you're in that preconceptual stage as a kid, you're a blank slate. Totally. You have no idea who you are or what you are or how to do it. And so you absorb, you know, some ridiculous amount. I think you know, this, don't quote me on this, but I think it's like 200 million brain cells that are like operating in your head from 0 to 7. And then when you hit that like conceptual stage 7 to 8, you shed like 100 million brain cells.
Is that right?
Yeah, because you learn the fundamentals, the infrastructure of who you're going to, you know, basically how does the world operate? And so, you know, if you grew up in a stressful environment or a really insecure, unstable environment from 0 to 7, chances are you're gonna be stuck with those anxieties for a while until you can work that stuff out either later in life or through some massive changes. And so I just think I kind of followed into that. So like, you know, we moved down to Mexico when I was a little kid. I think I was 4 or 5, somewhere in that range, for 2 years. And it was a really phenomenal experience to live life in another country. I know you've lived other places as well, so you know that world too. But like when you get to be outside of the ecosystem in which you'll spend the majority of your time, having that perspective was really helpful. You know,
I think it's a game changer. I've often found like people that I connect with the most, there's this like perspective shift that they've acquired, and it doesn't mean you have to move countries, but that often is one of the main things that happens. I think it rewires your brain.
Yeah, because you get to see what life's like outside of your world, right? Like what, just in a lot of ways, I feel like most people who I've met that spent time outside of the country, specifically in third world or emerging, have a different layer of empathy for people.
Yeah.
And so like,
makes sense.
You know, you get like in the world of like political talk and like, you know, it just always drives me nuts because I'm conservative, but I'm like you know, both sides of the aisle drive me crazy when they start talking about empathy for people and like what is compassion. It's like, okay, compassion is not just letting them continue to shoot themselves up with heroin. Like that is not compassion. Like, anyways, doesn't matter. We'll get on. Maybe we'll have time for that. But
I love that rabbit hole. Although it's a dangerous one with
like,
lots
honestly,
of potholes.
Every single one of those mothers, when I talk to them, I'm like, go stick your. So I went to Uganda in 2020. I went out there by myself in the middle of nowhere. No Mzungu is what they call white guys out there. They've never, foreigners, they've never had a Mzungu out in this area before. And so, I was like...
Never?
They've never had one out in this area.
Wow.
And so there was a tale of like some nuns that had come out in the 80s. That was the last time people remembered Mzungus being out in this area.
Why were you there? Like how? Like this,
we can get into that in a second. Let me finish this thought.
Going.
But my point is like you like drive out there. On my way out there were several like earth-shattering, really heart-tugging things. Where like there was a kid dead on the side of the road on the way out there. Got hit by a car. We found out later, but like hadn't eaten for a couple days and was just trying to drum up some food. So when I hear about compassion, like we in the United States, we don't need much. Like we think we do because of the kind of world we live around and the available resources. Kind of like it's all we know. But I think that's why it's so important to spend time outside the States. Especially in a third world country, is like you're like, oh, now this is really what it means to
suffering.
need. Like they may not have a meal today. Like when I was in Uganda, and we'll talk about that. Like for 3 days straight, all I ate were beans and rice and beans, over and over. And I got sick because they reheat the same rice. It was the same meal, just to be clear. Like not like made new beans
just
and rice.
Heat
like
it up again.
Actually, the same meal reused for 3 days straight. No refrigeration, and I got sick because my body wasn't used to it. But like that's the way that a lot of the world, the majority of the world, actually lives and operates. And so,
and most people don't understand that.
They don't get
in
it.
The
Yeah,
slightest.
and so it's like this like concept of like, well, the privileged out there, and it's like, but like point the finger back at yourself for a little while. Like you don't realize what's really going on. And I think spending time outside the States as a young kid helped me see that. And I've always had a heart for that. I lose sight of it often in the world of entrepreneurship because you're around venture cap money and like, what's the series round look like? That kind of world. When you start talking in the millions and, whatever, it's like you just lose sight of what it means to actually need.
Yeah.
And
well, our brain too, I think, gets so used to the thing that we're doing. Yeah. And you have to remind yourself of things. Like if you're in the venture capital world and you're doing entrepreneurship, that just seems like you're around those people and this is what's normal.
Yeah.
And this is how it is. And if you live in America, this is how it is. This is how America is. And suffering for me is just a little bit of suffering. And then you go and you shock your brain and you go, oh no, this is not. Yeah. This is suffering and I should be really grateful. And I shouldn't. And I struggled a lot actually with because my dad, which I grew up in a ministry family. My dad was the CEO of an organization that helped widows and orphans around the world. So I got to go experience this
really
stuff.
Cool.
Oh, I'm so grateful because I wouldn't have probably done that on my own. I got to see it because my dad was doing it. Yeah. And it completely changed. Even when I was a young kid, it just changed the way I saw the world. And I don't know how you do that unless you go and do it. And you have to get the shift of perspective. Yeah.
Rabbit Show, but he spent time in Russia too, didn't he?
He's been in Russia like over 60 times.
So we're recording during this is the 10th month, I think, of the war in Ukraine. I imagine some of that stuff kind of hits because he understands what's really happening. Like even in the States, anybody listening to this podcast is going to be like, well, I think I understand what's going on over there. When you go to another country and you learn their culture and you see things just happen different in different companies and cultures. And so it's like, how could Russia possibly believe that this was okay? But your dad, for example, probably has a kind of a different inside track as to well, this is how they actually think over there. And this is why they believe these things.
Very
not
much
okay
so.
in any sense,
it's not okay.
But still different perspective.
And for sure, there's different perspective on that kind of stuff. And our whole world is kind of propagandized now, right? We just we see the news.
Most definitely.
Yeah, and we accept, and everyone's guilty of this. We just accept the thing as that's true when there might be 17 different sides to the same story. Yeah. But the sad thing is, and this is what I've talked to my dad about, is the thing that ends up happening is we're all focused on this stuff up here, but the people that are suffering are all these citizens that have zero to do with it. Yeah. And it causes this divide and hate, and that's a whole rabbit hole.
I mean, the amount of equipment funding this podcast alone is more than several families make in most third world countries in a year combined.
Isn't that a mind-boggling thing to think about? Yes. And we're just used to it.
Well, because I think there is at some point, and maybe this is the privilege coming out a little bit, I'm kind of look, I didn't pick to be where I'm at. In a sense, yes, there is kind of a masochistic mindset you could take on, which is And I've been talking to my wife about this recently. Like, what does it mean to like, the rich young ruler who didn't make it to heaven? Like, what does that mean exactly, right? Because maybe there's more to that than I'm realizing. This whole like, it's harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom than it is for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle, right? You're like, what?
Yeah. What does that mean?
Yeah, but and I don't even think it's metaphorically. I think like it was actually meant to like see like it's so dang hard. How does that work? That being said, like. I can't feasibly drop. I have 4 young kids.
Right.
I own a business.
There's realities.
And these are things that I've done to myself in a sense. Like, they're my choice to do that. But, like, what do you give up? What do you not? I don't think it's bad to have a nice mic recording something that God's gifted you and I to be passionate about, to go after and be, explore. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But it's a good check. You always have to be asking yourself that, because that's where I think, and you probably have experienced this too, like, your other podcast with Jason, like, Jason was exposed to all the money, right?
Yep.
I mean, he's in it too, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah, for sure.
And so when you hit that point, it's like, what matters? Well, if I backtrack that, like, I heard all my life that money will never be enough.
Yep.
Well, I experienced that. Like, I started making real money.
Yeah.
And then because the guts of what made Scott tick were not in place, I didn't know who I was.
Yep.
And I was stuck in addiction and all these other things. I just freaking lost it all anyway. So it's like, money doesn't fix crap.
No.
So I don't necessarily think poverty fixes crap either.
Well, that's the thing, right? Because I felt this guilt when I was exposed to these things of why was I born in my family and why this and why that, and I don't know. Like, still to this, I could sit here and think all day, why have I been given so many blessings? Now, at the same time, someone maybe could sit in my seat and be like, why is all this stuff happening to me that I want, this was my dream and it didn't happen. And so I think perspective is a big part of that. But, when you shift that perspective and you really go down that road to see, okay, what do other people live like? What happened to me was I thought, okay, I could sit here and go all day long and say, why me, why me? Or I could go, for some reason that it wasn't because of me, I have all these blessings.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let that make me act. And that's what I'm not saying I do that all the time, but that's the mentality I want to have is like, okay, I've been given this, but other people haven't. So I can use these tools to actually go help people. Because I think if you don't do that, then you just sit in inactivity, which then you're not helping anybody. When you're inactive, you're just you're just wallowing. Right. So it's not good for you. It's not good for anyone else because you can't go help other people. You can't go actually serve. So that's kind of like the conclusion I've come to is be grateful and let that lead you to go and actually make a difference.
Yeah, I think the question that I often wrestle with, and maybe you're kind of in this same boat, is because we talked about this before the show, like, some things to talk about. For me, one of the biggest focuses has been around this concept of eco-reduction. Mm-hmm. I think about a good friend of mine who's in his 70s, who is just been handed a card of just tough stuff. He takes care of his 50-year-old Down's son, which Down syndrome, individuals with Down syndrome don't typically live super long. So the fact that his son is in his 50s, like that's some work. He's in his 70s.
Right.
And I just think about individuals with Downs for just a micro example. Like those guys and gals are not going to get the spotlight the same way you and I will.
Right.
Maybe they weren't given the gift of pizzazz, the feng shui, the charm that you and I think, I know you have, but like I'm just saying, I'm not saying I do, but I'm just like, the ability to sit down and process out like, here's how we grow a business or whatever frick we want to say, right? But like, that's why I've reading the Bible in the last year for me, like I've never subscribed really to being a Christian for a lot of reasons. My own faith journey is just pretty wild.
I'd love to dive into that, but continue forward.
But I decided finally, I've never even read the Bible. Like, is this thing even real? And so I started reading it, and I'm so convicted by the least of these that Jesus refers to. And it's like, it's not the guys and the gals that show up on the top feed of LinkedIn or Be Real
Certainly
or whatever's, trending, it's not that.
And they still have their struggles, but that's not the least of these.
No, but my point is like, yeah, right. But my point is like, life was not meant to be lived in a spotlight.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for individuals like you and I who might have that ability to grow, to be in the spotlight. That's why the ego is so important to address, because we're going to have more of a challenge slowing ourselves down because we intrinsically are going to be fed from external people around us and just our natural abilities that we could go do great things, right? Like, I don't know about you, but I was like, growing up, this is what I thought. I'm just like David in the Bible. I didn't even know what that really meant at the time. Like, in hindsight.
People were speaking that over you?
Right. In hindsight, it probably actually was in the sense of destruction, but like, I just had this, like, you're great, like, you're gonna go do something special. And so, you know, I was always like dreaming of, like, you know, how am I gonna go change the world? And I don't think there's anything wrong with changing the world, but I don't think it's done on this, like, macro level that, like, we're kind of taught as a kid. I actually think like the world is changed in the alleyways, you know, where like nobody's seeing it. It's done at local, you know, Catholic charities, at the Union Gospel Mission, like serving a meal around the corner. When you're not seen, no one's giving you kudos. That's where the world changes. And so, like, to remember to not be glory seeking in everything we do. You can be successful, wildly successful, but the philanthropist inside of me that prescribes to the, like, spiritual philanthropist, if you will, like what I feel like God actually calls me to do is to do crap that nobody else is going to know about and to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Not be seeking some external validation or reward. And I've seen, it's interesting because in the last year I've done that a lot. There's a lot of stuff that I won't talk about. And I've seen rewards come from that, not because I was expecting it, but because, like, I just felt like things continue to line up despite the fact that I was no longer focused on making it, I was focused on giving. Or it's just that whole concept of the upside down kingdom. It's really what I think it kind of boils down to.
What do you feel like
this is turning into a religious podcast really quick?
It's okay. No, listen, we're going down what we care about. It's great. What do you feel like is the differentiator in that? Is it just your heart set? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, is it, I guess, how do you make those decisions? Because some of those you will get this praise and it may feel good. How do you, in your opinion, handle that? Because I've struggled with this. Okay, how much is it okay for me to be like, you know, I'm a social person. I feel good when my friends or this person says this kind thing about me. Then is that my ego spiking up? Maybe, but is that wrong? Maybe not in balance. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think those questions need to get answered on more of an existential level of, like, and we won't probably get into it on this podcast, but, like, when you peel back the layers of Gideon, like, I've had the layers peeled back on Scott in the last year. You discover that a lot of the reasons and the things that you felt were harmless, or like, yeah, it's not a bad thing that somebody compliments me, is actually underlying driven by usually insecurities that are unaddressed from early childhood traumas or areas that maybe just there's just some stuff that hasn't been, you know, worked out all the way. And, like, for me, I've decided that my value, and now this is not right, I'm actually, like, working to undo this, but that my value is predicated on how you see me. So my Scott's value is determined externally. When I wear my heart on a sleeve, what I'm saying is I'm relying on everybody else around me to tell me what actually matters. Are we recording?
Yeah.
Okay. Pause for that. It's the first time doing audio, or video, so, you know, so, like, so if I'm relying on everybody else, then of course, because here's what happens. If somebody comes up to you, Gideon, and they're like, you know, bro, that podcast was terrible. And, like, it's somebody you cared about. Does that irk you? Does that, like, mess you up?
I think for a second it would.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't think that would make me stop.
Yeah.
See,
not necessarily stop, but, like, when people think ill of you.
Yeah.
For me, maybe I shouldn't. I'm not speaking.
But of course,
this is for me. I'll say if somebody said, like, if I feel like I'm missing out, that messes me up.
Yeah.
If I have, like, extreme life FOMO, it's really irritating. Like, I missed out on a business deal and it irked me big time. You know, I have a hard time accepting that I'm imperfect. Even though I know I'm imperfect. Like, clearly, history tells me I'm imperfect. I have a hard time accepting it. But also, when somebody thinks ill of me, a business partner, my spouse, my friends, and they communicate that to me, it messes me up. And I become useless at work. I can't think straight. It's like it's knocking me off my expectation of myself.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. What I have a hard time with this is how much of it is normal and how much of it is like, okay, you need to fix this. Like, what's the balance in that? Because I think you could get stuck in overthinking. I'll say I have gotten stuck in overthinking that. Why do I feel this way? Why am I doing what I'm doing? I remember this time in my life where I was questioning everything, and I was like doing the dishes, and am I doing the dishes because I want my mom to think that I'm nice and serving?
Yeah.
Or am I doing the dishes because I'm servant-hearted? And does that make me feel, it's just, I mean, you could spin in that forever. Yeah. And for me, when I started over-questioning that, it led to, like I was talking about before, inaction. And then that's when I decided, okay, this is obviously a battle that I have to face and that you have to face and that probably everyone that's listening has to face in some level, is this battle between ego. But is that battle won? Do you know what I'm saying? Is there a point where you get to like, no, I just literally do not care about what anyone thinks of me. And if my spouse says something that hurts me, it's going to kind of throw me off? Or is it that's just a little bit normal and we're on a journey to get that better and more balanced? Do you know what I'm saying?
I do. In recovery programs, specifically 12-step programs, they often talk about, and I subscribe to this, that I'll be in recovery for the rest of my life. There's no fixing. Like, like in a sense, there's healing.
Yes, there's healing.
And living in recovery doesn't mean you're failing, but it's a concept of consistently offering yourself up as powerless. So, step one, you're powerless to your addiction, coming to the conclusion, I'm powerless over my addiction, which to me is powerless over self, powerless over my own ability to manage because my life was out of control. And that doesn't change when addiction goes away. It's a part of the ethos of who I am. I'm constantly learning, and because I'm constantly having to surrender, I'm constantly learning. There's a we can talk about career stuff in a second, but one of the most foundational people that I've had the privilege of working with was he was a senior director at Home Depot for their corporate team, and he always used to say like, "Hey, you don't know what you don't know," referring to data. So there's miles and miles of data on basically everything today, right? And so this was like, we're building KPIs out for a particular app that we were using with Home Depot, and his question was, well, where's the data? Like, you don't know what you don't know. And so that's why you record the data. That's why you can analyze, if you have the data, then you can analyze the data. Well, the same thing goes in your personal life. If you don't ask yourself, Gideon, if you don't ask yourself why you don't, or why you do or don't do something, how can you know what to change? How can you know what to address? And so I mean, the ignorance of people, the ignorance of humanity often is left in someone's desire to just say, I am who I am. Like I used to, how many people hear like, I am who I am, I'm never changing.
I do not subscribe to that.
Well, but a lot of people, I'm sure you meet those people, right? Sure. And so those are like the most irritating people to be with because you're like, well, how are we ever going to get along? Because life is changing constantly.
Yes. No, I'm completely with you. When you say though, it's funny because I so much don't subscribe to that. It like makes me like, oh, right when you say that, because of my parents, I think just instilling to not be a victim in my mind.
Sure.
But it's funny you said the first step of recovery is to admit you're powerless. Yeah. And I'm sure there's like depth to that statement. But right when you said that, I was like that to me is like, I'm screwed if I do that. Because I, as a kid, was searching for that excuse. I was, I think, subconsciously begging for someone to tell me, this is how you are. So that I did not have to face myself.
Yeah.
So can you go into like deeper on why, let's say in a 12-step program, why that's the first step and what that actually means?
Yeah. All right. So I should be clear. In my step work, I'm early in what there's 12 steps. Literally, that's where that comes from.
Right.
I'm very early in that step work, and I've only been in 12-step programs for I think 5 or 6 months. So it's pretty fresh to me. So
that is fresh.
1, 2, and 3 are kind of like that's where I'm at right now. My life had become unmanageable. I'm powerless over my addiction, and I need to turn it over to God. And I'm willing to do so.
Okay, I love that.
I'm like, for anybody who's like, that's not exactly what it is. I'm sorry. It's fine. Like, you understand.
People see it in different ways, right?
No, I know, but anybody in 12 steps would just obliterate me for screwing that up. But it doesn't matter because you say it like every single meeting. Going to a meeting tonight. So, like, my addiction, I have, at a really early age, I was sexualized. And I say that, like, this, you made it, this term, like, I don't want to be a victim. That's a very valid comment. To some extent, you have responsibility in everything that's happened, even for most people, almost no matter what it is, you had a part to play in it.
But some people are real victims, too.
There are victims out there, yes, most definitely. And I'm not trying to desensitize any of, like, the harshest things that have happened.
Yeah, no.
But in general, like, yes, things happen to us. We have our own parts to play in it. And so the 12-step program is not about being a victim. It's about identifying your part in it.
Yeah, I knew that. That's why I just wanted. I knew there was more to that.
So, like, for me, I was like hooked because of some of the instability, what I would classify as child abuse, physically and verbally, and somewhat mentally. There's been some other stuff psychologically on my mom's side, even. Not all the way, like not all the time, but like when things were bad, they'd get out of hand. And oftentimes, I had to find comfort as a kid in something. Like that's my mind. I'm looking for comfort. Of course. So what's going to calm me down?
Well, you're looking to feel safe, right? And that's as a kid. That's the number one thing.
Right. So there's music as a part of that. But another thing that came up was, this is like pre-internet days, or like right around. Like I'm like the generation that remembers both sides. And this is like when like the Sunday morning Sears catalog would come out, and you could find the girls out of the women in underwear. So like this is like early on, but like that was like the kind of stuff I didn't know. To be honest, I didn't even know what to do with it. I just knew it felt good. And so that was pretty early on. I want to say probably like 6 or 7 years old that started for me, and it really went unchecked for a long time, and so, and then of course the onset of the internet, and like, I give a lot of grace to parents in a sense. They also were stupid, but like a lot of people that I spend time with in 12 steps, specifically around, I'm in Sexaholics Anonymous right now.
Same as Jason. I know that.
Yeah, right. So, and so, like, hearing his stuff, I'm like, yeah,
you related.
SA's a big group, so there's a lot of us. Most people probably need to be there. They don't realize it. But, so anyways, doesn't matter. That's another topic. But, so anyways, a lot of the guys that are good, and Jason actually fits into this exactly. I heard it. He was in that same range of, like, early internet when, like, it wasn't quite understood. Like, how reaching into the house is this device, is this thing. And so, I had figured out the internet well before my parents did. I knew where the delete history button was, right? Like I knew all that stuff. My biggest challenge was to stuff enough pillows around my computer to hide the dial-up sound that was happening at 2:00 in the morning, right? So, and I got caught by my brothers and stuff. Like, I don't even know, like I haven't talked to them about this, but like, I'm assuming that they had their own stuff.
Yeah.
But I got caught enough times, but the internet was never pulled out of my house. It was just there all the time. And so I just had such a fascination with sex. It just had it, not knowing this at the time, but like, those synapses in my brain were firing really early. Yeah. And they became a place of comfort for me. Yeah. When things were chaotic, we moved 20 times before my 21st birthday. I mean, we were a transient family. We saw some success, there was sometimes...
Not a lot of stability.
Virtually none. Except within the family unit, which we all perceived was a really healthy family unit. Externally, I was like, those guys over there, right? We're the healthy ones. Right. Well, now today's, I've spun out of disaster land. So, like, I don't think that's totally true. We're a really transient family. And, I saw some stuff. I saw my parents lose houses because they got themselves into a financial disaster. Right. And, so we've had homes foreclosed on and cars get repoed out of our driveway. I got to see a lot of that instability. And sex was always just a place to go.
Yeah.
And so, it became a part of my identity pretty early on, and it ran rampant all the way through. And I was just always the kid who didn't want to talk about it because, I'd go to church and stuff, and, you'd sit with your friends, and they'd be like, bashing the guy that looked at porn or whatever. And you're like, like me this morning, like before church.
Yeah, that guy's terrible.
Yeah. So, it's no wonder, like, heading into my adulthood and being married, like, that was like, man, if there's anybody listening to this podcast who is actually struggling with sexual addiction of any kind, like, you must address it as soon as you can. Even if you're married,
so true.
Just because you're married doesn't mean shit. Like, you have to deal with
100%.
And usually you can't do it by yourself. No. Like, there are people that are like this. They're very, very, very small. I can count on one hand how many guys that I trust that actually are telling me the real answer here when they tell me this, that they say they just magically stop looking at porn. That's baloney. When it is like actually like a part of your story and you've been hooked into it, you don't just stop doing something that your body is telling you should do.
Yeah.
You don't stop eating because you decided you're going to stop eating.
Right, because it's so habitual at that point in
your brain.
You
have highways in your brain that are telling you to go there for 100 different reasons. You don't just stop out of nowhere. And so you can say it all you want and you can hide it all you want, but the guys and the gals who, especially guys like in SA, like if Jason Portnoy were sitting right here, he'd be like, yeah, that's exactly true. Like you can deny it as long as you want. And usually that's the hardest part about addiction is you've gotten so good at lying, you're so good at lying to yourself. You have to make sense psychologically to lie to yourself about what you're doing and the damage that it's causing. You have to make sense of it with yourself first before you can lie to anybody else.
And it creates, I think, more empathy too, almost for yourself. You're like, okay, I can't.
But you give yourself a license to continue the destruction. And addiction.
No, I'm saying not admitting that you need help or you need someone to help you through it, and that this is a habit and this is a whatever. I need to fix it. I think, and maybe for some it doesn't, but I think it could give you more empathy for yourself by just admitting. I guess this is the whole admitting that you don't have as much power as you think over yourself.
Yeah, but honestly, but I don't need empathy.
Well, fair enough.
I really don't. I don't need empathy. I need someone from the outside to call me out and say
also,
this is what's actually happening. Yeah. I need real
accountability too.
Yeah, because lust killed the real. Like my fantasy mind. That's a quote out of the White Book, which is the essay curriculum. Lust killed real. I lived in this land of fantasy, and so and also I'm just an excellent compartmentalizer. Like, you saw the disaster before we started the show of like the 8 things going on, and I could sit down here and I could just go at it because I'm a great compartmentalizer. Yeah. There's 20 things on fire right now happening around me, and we're just chilling here doing this thing. That's a byproduct in a lot of ways, some genetic, but also just how I've managed to make sense of my life. Again, going back to early childhood stuff. And so for guys and gals, and I will say gals because that's increasing dramatically, stuck in addiction. I mean, by the way, that could be food.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of addictions.
There's they call what do they call in the 12-step internal group? They call it tubbies. It's Overeaters Anonymous, basically, is what it is. But
they call it tubbies.
Yeah, but it's like they call it for themselves, but
okay.
Externally that wouldn't be looked well upon. But it's true. Like food is just like food is no different. It's what you're actually addressing in the process of addiction is what's going on in your brain.
Yeah,
and it's you're not making decisions cognitively that are healthy. You're making decisions based on what your brain is telling you that you need to feel better.
Yeah.
And so you're not living in reality.
No.
So that could be gaming, that could be food.
Oh, addiction's everywhere, yeah.
Yeah, it's alcohol, it's substance abuse. I mean, talk about vapes. I mean, like, it doesn't matter. For me, substance abuse has been a secondary thing. Sexuality, because it's so kind of core to who I am, the bottle's in my head. I don't have to go buy, I was, at the worst of my drinking, I was polishing off like a fifth a day. It's a lot of alcohol. And I would just rinse and repeat. I did that for years. And despite going to church and, having good, friends that potentially could call me out if they knew.
So you were doing all of this in secret?
All in secret. Oh, yeah. I mean, LaCroix, I carry around a LaCroix, and it would be, 3/4 vodka, 1/4 whatever LaCroix is.
If you could boil it down, what were you running from, or why were you?
Internal shame that I didn't know how to process.
Okay.
So
What was the shame though?
well, actually, that's what's interesting. The substance abuse was secondary because the biggest thing that I was dealing with was the disaster of sex addiction that had run rampant.
Makes sense.
Like,
that makes a lot of sense.
And I don't know. Let's see. Is there any reason not to put this out? Not sure how far I want to go on this. Like my wife's probably going to publish a book someday and go far more into detail of the disaster that I've caused. But let's just say, like, and maybe rightfully so. But like, I went from porn as a young kid to I lost my virginity before my 14th birthday, which is probably the first time I've like talked about that anywhere public that could be recorded. All the way through, now being married, I've cheated on my wife, and which has just been caused a disaster. And that looked like porn to paid girlfriends, to massage parlors, to bikini baristas, to prostitutes, and you name it. That's why Jason and I have a lot in common. He's somebody, I'm a nobody, but like that's the thing is we're both addicts, and like the addict world's we all see it the same. Like you are stuck in your addiction, you are powerless, and your life has become unmanageable. And that's how I would just say, like, no matter what it is, whether it's porn and it's causing damage, it's lust in your mind that's causing damage, or you're as far out to the extremes that I am and you're paying for it. You have to address it because it's just going to get worse. The destruction is going to get worse, and you're not living real life.
Yeah.
Like, be free, get into recovery.
What's a practical first step for people?
Show up to a meeting. It was so weird for me too, because like, for me, I'm 34. And like, and I think of like, 12 steps. I think like, that's where all the freaks go. Like all the weirdos go there. You gotta
be down for that.
And there's like Christian organizations that have taken bits and pieces of 12 steps. And I think they can work for some people. They didn't work for me for a handful of reasons. I also really wasn't working programs. Like for you to work, like recovery is not a passive thing. Recovery is an active thing. And so for you to take a step of showing up to anything that somehow could put you in the light of what you're doing is helpful, I think. For me, I just happen to be a big fan of 12 steps because it puts such a heavy emphasis on you must admit. It's like you're not hiding anymore, dog. Like here you are, your best thinking got you here. And to me, that's really powerful to be able to step into that place because I've been in the dark for so long. Like I said, 34 years old, the majority of my life I hid in the dark. That's a pretty crappy place to be.
Yeah, that's tough.
And so finally seeing some light just by simply acknowledging my crap and walking through with other people, who by the way are not freaks, they're some of the best people on the planet. Yeah. Like you have winners. Like we talk about like, you think like what people's perceptions are of 12 steps.
Yeah.
There are winners, multimillionaires, guys that are far more successful than you and I in those groups who have been disasters and made wrecks of their lives.
I believe it.
And are no better than the guy who makes $12 an hour. Right. Well, here we're in the state of Washington, 15 whatever an hour, flipping burgers. They sit in the same room and they say the same things because they are the same way, the same people. We're all addicts. We're all after the same thing. I heard recently from somebody, I don't even know where it came from, that no matter how far down the road of recovery you get, that road of recovery is still only 10 feet from the ditch. Like, no matter how many years you've been sober, you can fall right back into it.
The battle doesn't necessarily stop.
No, because the neurological pathways, while you may have built some nice on-ramps now in the world of recovery, which I feel like I'm just starting to build, maybe just barely scratching that surface, those pathways are still there. They're going to be there. And so you can fall right back into your addiction at any point. If you've ever built any of those addictions, guess what? You can go back there.
What do you think was the thing that pushed you to change? Because I mean, and I heard this with Jason's story, and I actually didn't know how much your guys' stories aligned, and finding this out now, which is very interesting. That it's like he got caught or something happened to make him to really push him to stop, like, because he would like kind of admit, and then it was like it wasn't enough. What do you feel like for you? And I ask this because I'm sure there's people listening that maybe don't relate to all of it, but relate to at least some of what you're saying. Yeah. And I'm imagining what they're thinking is, I also feel trapped. What do I do? Yeah. What's the thing that's going to push me to go to a meeting or to, confide in someone and start actually – and this can be for any sort of sex addiction or any other addiction that we all struggle with some sort of addictions. Like what is the thing that pushes us to change? Or I guess for you, what was the thing that pushed you to change?
Usually when the pain of not changing is greater than the pain of changing is what causes it. I kind of sense that in your interview with Jason, and I would describe, probably most people feel that way. It's like, look, we're always intrinsically after the thing that's going to cause us the least pain.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, the pain of not changing is going to be more than the pain of actually addressing yourself. When that happens, that's by the way, I think that's bottom.
Yeah.
That is the bottom. That's the true bottom, when you know that you've hit that point. Whatever that looks like, if that's like a single dude or gal like dealing with something, like you don't have to be married and go through the disaster that I've gone through, or be the partner or whatever, and to address this stuff, like you can still hit your bottoms where you're at. But for me, I got caught. And for me, I've told people this, like I didn't get into recovery initially because of me. I got into recovery because my wife.
Right.
And I didn't respect myself enough to address my own crap. I just didn't want to lose my family. Now, what my counselor said, which I agreed with now, and it was really hard to hear then, was like, what do you mean you're going to lose your family? You already have lost your family. You need to look at it the other way around. And so there was a change that happened pretty early on, the first couple months. This is about a year. At the time of recording this, we're about a year into me getting caught and this kind of process starting. The first couple months, maybe a month or so, was more about how can I get my life as closely back to the way it was without any problems. And so since then, things have changed a little bit, but not since then. Like it was a definite shift in, okay, I can't do this for anybody else. I have to do this for me, for myself. Like if you're not whole, if I'm not whole, if I don't care about myself enough to address and work through these things, I can't go be anything for anybody else. It starts from the inside outward, not the outside in.
Yeah.
And as I was telling you earlier, I'm a fringe player. Like I want everybody else to validate me.
Yeah.
I want everybody else to think well of me, whatever, right? And so I haven't had a lot of respect for myself for a long time. Intrinsically, I have some deep buried lies, and here's one of them. Deep down, Scott, you're a piece of shit. That's what I believe. I don't think that's right. That needs to be worked out and kind of surface. Yeah,
it's like just a belief.
I don't want to be alone.
Yeah.
Like I cannot survive if I'm alone, and you're a piece of shit. Are like these really intrinsically deep buried things. And until I was willing to face and address those things and make a program about me, I wasn't really in recovery. I was just doing stuff for other people. And so I started the journey because of somebody else, and I decided, man, this has to die. I have to be done. The ego has to be reduced. And I started listening to people. I also, being an entrepreneur, you're constantly forced to just go places where nobody's been. Trust your gut over other things, because otherwise, how did we press forward, right? And so, and that's also like a byproduct of like, I just have intrinsic problems with authority figures. I just don't frickin' tell me what to do. I hate it.
You're going to pave your own road.
I'm going to pave my own road, damn it. But that's also caused me to have to fail to learn. And that's also not a healthy place to be. That's an ego thing. And so...
Well, sometimes you have to fail, but if you're constantly like pushing to fail to learn, the only way to learn is to fail.
But it's another belief of mine is that I have to fail to learn. And that's not true. I don't have to fail to learn. I can raise the bottom by watching other people and what they do and actually listen to people. So like the most important few things that I did early on in this recovery was, one, I listened to a guy that told me about, hey, have you ever read the Bible? And I was like, whatever,
Bible schmible.
Okay, but actually maybe there's something to that because I grew up around it. It was forced down my throat. Maybe there's actually something to this, but I've never even read it. So how do I know?
So did you leave your faith at a certain point? Or were you
I
just
don't know if I was
like,
ever really in the faith.
Okay,
that's probably the better way to say it.
Gotcha.
Like, I think the Spirit, as I understand God, like this is my higher power, like the Christian's faith. I think the Spirit operates in some really strange ways. Like things have been happening for a lot of years to kind of cue up what's happened, but I wouldn't have known what all that was. But I really think like, so his advice was get in the Bible in the morning and get up with a nice cup of coffee. That was like the best thing ever. Cause I love coffee. We're doing it, right? Uh-huh. And so like a good cup of coffee earlier than everybody else. So get up early. And that's what I started doing. I'd get up before everybody else and I'd have a solid 30, 45 minutes. And it's a routine, some discipline. So I started going to bed a little earlier to do that, which was really helpful. I stopped watching TV as much. In fact, I didn't watch TV for like 6 months, like nothing, like zero TV. And so get up in the morning and do that. Get into a program. I started with a Christian sort of recovery. It was a recovery program. It's not quite like 12 steps. And it was helpful to do that. Go to counseling. Like I don't want help. I don't ask for help. I don't need help. I'll do it myself.
I'm kind of like that, except for my mom. My mom's like, okay, I'll accept help from my mom, but everyone else.
Yeah, there might be some people, but in general, when you don't ask for help, that's partly the problem.
Yeah.
So I didn't need help from anybody else, but go get help. So I didn't want to go to a counselor, a shrink. Like I don't need some guy or gal like telling me what to do. And it just happened to be that I got synced up with a 70-year-old recovery guy who's a former Vietnam vet who's just hardcore, and it was exactly who I needed to meet. It was like the perfect thing. So I might just, I don't know, but plug to solid counselors out there, like definitely go.
Makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And, and there was like some other things early on, like praying with my wife was really important. We've stopped that. I wish that could get addressed because some of that's been really like kind of off. But getting
why I asked that because I'm really inconsistent praying.
It's another example of doing something for somebody else.
Gotcha.
Like part of my challenge with it is I don't see the value of it. Like why? What am I doing?
You don't see the direct value,
right? Yeah. But then as this is like tethered back to like reading the Bible. I'm like, oh, like there's something to this. Anyway, so there's like a few things that like have really helped in this recovery process, but all of that stuff requires external input. So I had to humble myself. That goes back to like why I always talk about the ego reduction. Like I had to stop pretending that I knew it all. Because again, my best thinking got me here. I'm a disaster. Leading up to that, we've talked about this a little bit. I was drinking a fifth every night.
Right.
I was unfaithful to my spouse. I was an asshole to my kids. I mean, you could say physically abusive towards my kids. Definitely verbally abusive to my kids, unloading on them for stupid stuff because mostly I was drunk. I wasn't even in my right mind. And then I thought I was also really cool, and I decided to get on the Wall Street Bets gang, and I had been doing that for 6 months. And anybody who decided to invest in either crypto or Wall Street Bets related, the meme stonks world, in 2020 to 2021 range, felt it hard.
This sounds like a cocktail of
it was just it was a cacophony of disaster is what it was. So, I gambled away. I wouldn't say I wasn't investing. I was gambling.
I said that too. I said I was investing.
I was borrowing money, and I was taking excess funds from the house that we had just recently sold, and I socked several six-figure dollars into the stock market on high-risk options trading on meme stocks that I was convinced, thank you Reddit, that, in fact, I was the guy posting. I probably have caused so much damage by the kind of crap that I put out on Reddit. I was one of those names that you recognize. I won't say it, but like I probably like I had,
Did you watch the GameStop movie?
No, I haven't. I actually I can't. That's like actually part of my thing. It's like for a lot of reasons I can't go back to that stuff, and because I lost so much money, it's very difficult for me to swallow losing a fortune. When we talked about earlier, we were talking about like the money powering this, right? A couple $1,000s, right? It's a joke compared to the amount of money that I pissed away that I'm going to be having to repay for a decade because I was a dum-dum. And so I just have been an absolute disaster. Like if you were gonna I don't know, you name this whatever you want. But if it was me, I was like, yeah, meet Scott Cook, the epic disaster. Like that's probably what I would say. Like that's me. And so I don't know.
But I want to say real quick, it's funny that that's what you say about yourself because right when I met you, I thought, we've talked so much about ego and different stuff, but I literally called my dad right after that first class because I met Scott, I met you through a class, which people have probably heard me before say on this podcast that I think college is kind of a scam.
It probably is
mostly a scam. But for relationship building, and there's a lot of good things about it. I'm not saying don't go to college. I went. I'm so grateful I went. But the only class that I've gotten anything out of was this entrepreneurial class, small business consulting, which I'm still in. And Scott came to our class, and he was the one that was basically took over our teaching. And right when I talked to you, I was like, there's something different about this guy. Like, I could feel your vulnerability. I could feel that you cared about the same things as I did. And I literally called my dad right after. And I was like, I feel like I was supposed to meet this guy. I feel like I was supposed to be in this class. Like, this has been I knew it right away. So I think you've obviously been broken down to a certain point in your life, but that's allowed you to, like, be able to speak to me and to people, you know, younger than you or older than you as someone that's going through, like, first a cautionary tale.
Yeah. Long cautionary tale.
Right. Yeah. But also be able to meet people where they are, because I'm pretty confident you don't have a whole lot of judgment for people because you can, you know, you've been through it all yourself. And it creates this unique scenario for you to, like, I could just feel right away that you were living in vulnerability. And, like, that spoke to my heart.
Yeah.
And so you know, it's funny to say, oh, you know, Scott Cook, the disaster or whatever, but I just think, like, I don't think you realize how inviting you are to people to be able, like, your spirit right away is like, it makes people feel comfortable to be able to talk to you. And I think that's probably a byproduct of some of the absolute disaster that was your life. Yeah. And maybe a lot of that wasn't because of you. It was just, you know, childhood trauma and stuff not dealt with. But a lot of people, like, we need more people not to have disastrous lives, but to be open for other people to be able to share their secrets and their stories. Like, I guarantee you people listening to this right now are going to feel more healed because, and I didn't realize, like, this podcast would become what it's becoming, but it's like, and I love it. I want people to feel like they're not alone. And you make people just not just your stories and what you've gone through, but, like, your spirit, how you talk, makes people feel not alone. So I don't think it's a disaster at all. It's funny to say that, but I think it's probably going to be a gift. It is a gift, and it will continue to be a gift for so many people later on.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you saying that because I am my worst critic in a sense. Yeah, I mean, I think about my kids. You know, I think about the stories that are going to be left for my kids. You know, and I heard recently that, you know, you don't realize how you don't realize how you jacked your kids up until they're in their 30s and they start going to counseling and you hear about it. I'm like, yeah, I can see that. So I appreciate that. Yeah, this is, like, in the past. I think this is true. Like, I'm just gonna say God knew what was gonna happen here, and I think there's, like, if people can learn from what I've done, if I can help them raise their own bottom so they don't have to fall to the ground, I'll count that a blessing.
And there's two themes I hear you say when what you have to have in order to change, which is a humble attitude and discipline. I don't know if you would add to those two things, but that's where it's like, you have to be humble, you have to die to yourself, but then you have to act.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a much more organized world than most people pay attention to. I mean, think about the changing seasons. It's snowing here in Spokane today, right? 3 months ago, it was nice and crispy, right? But, like, you just look at nature.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm, like, one of the biggest tree huggers. Like, it's kind of funny because I am super conservative, but then I also, like, I'll pile onto the tree hugger gang real quick. Like, I love there's nothing greater than going out, especially in the Pacific Northwest, and going for a nice long hike and, like, standing at the top of a peak and looking out and seeing just, you know, God's creation. But it's all organized. And so God is not, and this is, like, something that I've learned is, like, I operated for a long time in the chaos. Yeah. And it got me a certain distance in some ways, maybe at least, like, on the external perspective, like people, wow, Skyler, you're so successful.
Yeah.
No, I was a disaster. And I was just learning to live in the chaos. And it's not until that discipline, I'm glad you mentioned that because that's true. There is a sense of maturity that comes in deciding, no, I'm going to be disciplined. I'm not gonna stay up watching TV until the week.
Exactly.
Andor's out right now. I love it. Like, Andor's cool. I'm not gonna stay up and watch Andor at midnight. Like that's so, whatever. This is my opinion. It's so dumb. Like, give yourself some time back. Wake up. And you've probably heard this too. You can Google this, I'm sure. But like the most successful people, their habits. What do you always see? They're disciplined. Whatever it is, they're disciplined.
You mentioned the guy that was like that you got paired up with the counselor or whatever. He was a retired vet, right?
Yeah.
So it's funny, it's the whole discipline thing, because Jocko Willink is? Yeah. His book is Discipline Equals Freedom, right? It's like there's something about those guys, and they know it. Like, that is such a key to just actually get disciplined with your life.
They know it because they experienced it not, right? And the adverse, what it was, and that's how I would probably say the same thing too. I have a long ways to go. But like, I started eating right. I stopped drinking.
Yeah.
I started sleeping well. I woke up earlier. I started exercising. I love basketball. I'm playing basketball now a couple times a week. And everything about my life started to come together in a different sense. Not that it was fixed, but just made a lot more sense.
More peace, probably.
Yeah, a lot more serenity. I'm making decisions differently. And I'm not sure, for those of you guys that grew up in the Christian faith, like this, you guys are the worst. I'm in that game. Like, I'm part of the worst of this. It's like, forget those self-help books. Like, all I need is Jesus.
No.
Baloney.
I'm the side now.
Scripture speaks to a lateral, like multi-parts of the body coming together for different pieces, like different members of the body offering different things. That's the Holy Spirit being illuminated unilaterally through people.
I completely agree.
Maybe some of that stuff is funky and weird, but like, don't shrug off downloading an app that teaches you how to breathe for 10 minutes. It might actually do wonders for you.
I could not agree more. I may get, people may not be happy about me saying this, but I always, and I'm guilty of the same thing. Like Jesus, I surrender it all to you. And I'm not saying that's wrong. Yeah. But it's like to the point where I don't have to do anything.
Yeah. To the point of inactivity. Right.
Like, except when I was in Spain, I was so anxious. Oh my gosh. Like, incredibly anxious about everything, and it's because I hadn't faced my own dragons. But I wanted to believe, and I mentioned this earlier in our conversation. Like, I was waiting for someone to tell me, like, you've got anxiety, like you're never able to change, because it would have been comforting to me. Now, it would have been not good for me, but it would have been comforting to me. But I remember, I'm going to share the story. It might like sound a certain way, but people will know what I'm trying to say. There was a bunch of missionaries that came and visited us in Spain. And because my dad was still doing some missions
so he came and crashed the couches and the crevices of the...
Yeah, and listen, I want to do nonprofit work. I think it's like, of all the things my dad has done, like that, his time in ministry and the amount of lives he's changed is the thing I respect him most for among the many, many things that he's done. So don't get me wrong. I think that is the gold of life. But these people were coming. And some of them, not all of them, was sort of like, what do you, like, it just felt like there was this, like, best way to say it would be this, like, spirit of sort of laziness of, like, all, like, kind of the over-surrendering thing. Like, I'm going to raise money so I can go travel the world, type of deal, and not, really serve. Only some. Others were great. But I remember thinking, gosh, this sounds like the best thing in the world to me. Like, I was like, if I could just be a missionary, because it felt like I didn't have to face myself. And I don't think that's why everyone is. But it was that there was that, like, I would love to be able to surrender to Jesus so much to the point where I don't have to do anything or actually do the things that get me out of my comfort zone. Yeah. And like face the dragons in front of me in my soul, whatever it is, that everyone has them and they're all different things, but I did not. I was hoping I would not have to face them. I was like, I remember thinking, like, I'm going to be the guy that, like, scoots around all these, like, hard journeys and be enlightened, Yeah. And I just, like, I've realized you just can't, And I think God or whatever you believe can take you in multiple different trails and And the journey is, in my opinion, it's all about the journey. The destination, often we think it's going to be a certain way, and it's just the next journey.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, there's you can't go so far to say, in my opinion, where you have to act, right? You can't just fully surrender. There is a responsibility in us.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the case with your story, is you had to take some responsibility and actually act. Yeah,
it's true. And just selfish plug for the missionaries, like that is the hardest work.
100%.
Except for being a mom. That might be the harder of all those jobs. But like being a missionary without the pizzazz, like I think it's really sexy to talk about being a missionary, especially other people go, oh, how's like, before I was married, I thought about that too, because I thought, man, that's like, I'm gonna get all the chicks. So dumb. But like, and
this
like,
is
of course,
a great angle.
well, it was like this weird thing I would like, the part of me that was like doing it maybe for the right reasons was like, I allowed that part to kind of cover over all of the ego part of that as well. And like, it was just a load of crap. But like, if somebody, because I went to, like I told you, I went to Uganda in 2020. But I talked about it all the time with people.
Yes.
And I went there for me. I didn't go there for those people.
Yep.
It was a completely selfish act. I'm ashamed that I went there under the pretext and the context that I did.
But you still probably help people.
I don't know, maybe, but if it happened, it wasn't on my own will. It was such a selfish act on my part because I wanted so badly to be a public savior for the scenario that it was that I shouldn't have done it. I should like if I had my drug, like if now in a healthy mind, I wouldn't have gone over there. I would have done something totally different. And I just think that there's a lot of missionaries I've met or people that just like have that kind of the nonprofit work that if they were never going to be recognized by anybody for any circumstance, they probably wouldn't do those things.
But does it make it wrong? I know I've asked this before. What? Like, I don't know what I believe about this actually, because I kind of mentioned this before that there's this part of us that wants to be recognized because we're social beings.
Yeah.
How much of that is like you say some of these people wouldn't do it unless they were recognized, but they still might be doing really good work. Do you see what I'm saying? Is it worth just then not doing that because someone should be doing this work? If it's transformational work, I guess is the best way to say it. Even if 60% of it is your ego and 40% isn't, is it still worth doing?
Yeah, of course. But so long as you're ignorant to that fact, if you and I are having this discussion and now you've been made aware of, oh, hang on, maybe I should think about this, and you ignore that and go do all those things.
Fair.
What's the point of doing that? Yeah, you could go benefit. Lots of great things happen to lots of people around, but they're still disasters at the end of the day.
True.
So, I just, this is just part of a cognitive awareness of who we are and why we do the things we do. But anyways, I know that's not exactly the point in your kind of story with your own missionary stuff.
Yeah, it wasn't about them. It was about me. It was about me trying to find something to escape in or surrender to that was unhealthy. It wasn't a real surrender. It was can I numb myself?
Right.
Because I don't want to face myself.
Yeah.
And at some point you have to face yourself or it just gets worse and worse. And then something happens where the pain becomes too hard, as you said.
The opposite of that, like this is just going to be kind of a strange transition, but I think about the guys mostly guys that I know of today that are super successful. Mm-hmm. Like name a couple.
That I know that are super successful?
I'm
how high up there? Like Elon?
Yeah, right.
Elon
So it's really easy to toss out some of the big ones, right? But like the Elons and the Bezos of the world, right? This is just my own thing. I believe that you can't get to that echelon of success in the world, perceived success, I should say, because internally they could be disasters.
Right.
They probably are. Perceived success with money without being absolute egomaniacs. I don't think they can do it. So I ask myself frequently, because I'm in the startup world, I love startups. I was just talking to somebody this morning. They were like, "Yeah, this is a really great idea, but I didn't want to spend time with you because I don't know if I actually want to get the thing off the ground." Like they didn't know if they were going to pursue their own startup idea, so they didn't want to waste my time. I was like, "No,
yeah,
I love it. Like, let's talk. I just want to work that out with you, because I just have a love and passion for it." But I do. There's just an observation I've made, both locally here in Spokane, in the Pacific Northwest, when you start talking to these private equity groups, the venture cap world, and you start meeting these people that have made it on paper, the majority of them are egomaniacs. They think they think they've got it, they've made it, it's their way. And you can find this trend of ego. And then I realized I don't really want that. But I don't want to sit on my feet and do nothing and make no money, because I also think I'm designed to do that. And I don't know what that means. I think my direction is philanthropy for sure. But like, so how do I navigate that, right?
I think you can do both, but that might be ignorant.
But that is exactly why I say the eye of the needle that's referenced in Scripture is so hard. Because it is very difficult. Imagine right now, like this thing, you just, whatever, you became the next Tim Ferriss. Let's say it like that, right? I love his podcast.
Yeah, so good.
You know, you become the next Tim Ferriss. That journey and the...
of course.
Oh, Gideon, look at you.
There's always that,
Look at Zac Efron. Like I'm sure you heard that a few times, right? Like that is going to, you're like, oh yeah, that feels good.
That's the heart,
But that is not healthy for you.
I agree. So this is what I was trying to say earlier. I agree. But does that then, if you're successful in any endeavor, and you could define success as so many different things too, right? Like we could talk about the word success for a long time. Yeah. But if you define it as like what everyone would think success is, and let's use the example you just used, should it just be a battle? Like, should I just be battling with myself and continuing forward? Because I feel like if not, it leads to inaction. And I think inaction is the worst of those things. Because that, I think, for me, I'll just speak for me, that would drive me further down. Instead of, hey, maybe God put this on your heart, or maybe you're supposed to do this, or maybe you need to deal with your own ego to be able to share stories that are going to change people's lives.
Maybe.
So I think you can look at it in different – I don't know what's right. But I think if not, like if you're going to go this thing that I'm chasing, whatever it is, I'm on my last week of soccer, so that ego trip's over for me. And it's a hard like separation of identity, and there's all that kind of stuff. But does that mean I shouldn't have played soccer? Like that feeling my identity so attached to soccer and my ego drove me to learn more about myself and push towards my discomfort and struggle with my ego to try to wrestle with it and face the dragon, right?
Yeah.
If not, you're not facing anything. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. But I think at the same time, like, you're just a run-of-the-mill human. Like, you're just a garden variety person. Like, it's like I heard this from a guy named Mark Levin. He's a podcast guy. He heard it from somebody else, so I don't know where it originally came from. But he said, think about history today. There might be in the thousands of people that we know and remember from history.
Right.
Okay? So who's your great-great-grandpa? Do you know his name? Great-great-grandpa. What's his name?
I know my great-grandpa.
That's not what I asked you.
Not great-great.
Yeah. What's his name?
I have no idea.
You don't remember.
Yeah.
You don't know what he looks like. You don't know what he's struggling. You don't even know. You might, from a 23andMe genetic test, you might learn a little bit about the guy or gal or whatever, right? Whoever they are. You have no idea who they are. Nobody knows. They are gone, out of the picture entirely. And so, if that's true, we've got a couple generations where people remember us, and only thousands-ish of people out of the billions of people that have lived on this planet. You and I are nothing.
I agree, but I would counter that with it doesn't matter how we remember it. It matters the impact we're making in the time that we're living.
Exactly.
It's the people around us.
But that's the mile-wide, inch-deep approach. And I'm suggesting to actually get to the heart of what you just said, that requires the mile-deep, inch-wide approach. So people might not remember who Gideon is. Maybe nobody remembers who Gideon is, but the one person that you really...
I totally agree.
So then, the question is, how do you get there, right? And I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of on my pedestal, like, talking about that, because it's like my own...
But I think the only way to do that is to, like, okay, like, you could say, you could have told me when I asked to do a podcast with you, you could have said no, because, it's going to make my ego is going to get inflated, and I'm going to, whatever, talk too much about this and that.
Sure.
And then you saying no to that Maybe it was the right decision, maybe it was the wrong decision. Or you saying yes, maybe it's the right, maybe it's the wrong. But maybe
I thought about it so I don't get indicted because I put some freaking information out there that got me sued. That was indicted's not the right word, but yeah.
But would it be worth it for you to struggle with your ego and to, I feel good when this person says this, but I've got to, I got to do my disciplines to get me back into my mind where I'm not inflated. Is that all worth it if one person comes away from the conversation and it deeply impacts their life? In my opinion, I would say yes.
I guess, but like this is where I'm learning to be selfish for myself.
Yeah.
I don't want to put myself in positions that I'm tempted to have that ego trip. It's like, I talk about like sexual addiction. It's like the idea of like, pulling up porn but not watching it. Like, just so that I can feel the, it's like, no, like run, don't do it. Like you don't do that.
Okay.
And anyways, we're way down in a rabbit hole, but I in general, this is like, you're talking about existential questions that are really good and they're probably not easily defined and answered. And it's probably what ends up happening is, hey, keep asking yourself that question while you move forward. Do what you feel like you're meant to do.
That's what I think the solution
Humble yourself and ask. Stay disciplined, like you're saying, and be willing. Part of that humility is a willingness to change. Be willing to change. If it becomes too much, be honest with yourself. But you got to be healthy. That's where, coming back to full circle of the addiction stuff. If you're stuck and locked in addiction of any kind, you're not thinking healthy. You're letting substances or things going on, in this case, like addictions, physical addictions in your head, mentally, rock you. You're not thinking straight. So you got to get healthy in order for these conversations to even matter.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Amen to that. Well, thank you for being vulnerable to that. I want to do a quick right turn.
Yeah, let's do it. You want to pause in case you want to cut that whole thing out?
No, that's amazing. Are you kidding me? That's what's going to make people, that's what makes people feel not alone. People don't care about as much successes, even though I think that's important too. It's inspiring, but they care about the real.
Yeah.
So, but there's a quote I want to read because I want to hear about your genius in
yeah, that's if just listeners. That's what?
I don't said that just to get a reaction out of you with all your entrepreneurial stuff. You have this quote on your LinkedIn. It says, "Observe, react. Someday I'll write a book on why those two words make the biggest difference in any entrepreneur's life." Why is that on your LinkedIn? What do you mean by that?
Yeah,
let's shift into an
it's kind of interesting.
Part.
I am nobody by most standards. Even Spokane, nobody knows who I am. It's so the fact that I'm on your show, it's like, who the heck is this guy? Which is totally fine. But I have noticed this trend of individuals who can do two things. How many people, so I'll start with this. How many people have you known in your life, and I know a lot, that for me personally, they come to me like, oh, I got this great idea. And you're like, sweet. And turns out it's a great idea. But then they don't do anything.
No, anything, yeah.
So
action's the hardest thing.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's a lot of people who just start things and they didn't actually think about it. They didn't even know they're trying to solve. In fact, it's not even a problem that needed to be solved. They just start doing something and then they wonder why it didn't work. It's like, what? So I've noticed for me, and I'm not saying I do this perfectly, but observing things that are happening is a unique skill. It's a soft skill.
Yeah.
I don't care, when I hire people, I don't know if I've ever asked for a resume. I've hired at least a dozen people by now. I don't give two craps about your resume. I want to know who you are.
Yeah.
Before I bring you on, we're spending time together. Mm-hmm. And I realize that as you scale an organization, you can't do that. But I would teach my managers to do that exact same thing. Forget the resume. Learn who people are. Because what you're looking for are soft skills.
School's a scam. I'm just kidding.
We can come back to that one in a little bit. But
it's being inflammatory.
School. Yeah. Anyways, doesn't matter. But and part of the things that I look for is are you observant? Are you paying attention to what's happening around you? Because I've learned that unique skill can unlock all sorts of stuff. No matter what the industry you're in. If you're, like I've mentioned, I worked for Home Depot before. In a Home Depot store, if you observe that the shelf, the aisle has, the products are strewn about or they're not in the right places, you can fix it. If you observe somebody's walking out the door with the TV, you can stop them. Well, if you observe things, then you can react. It doesn't mean you always do, but a lot of people are just, it's like, I just want to show up and do my thing and go home and check out and not have to think. And I just am not interested in doing life with people like that because they're not paying attention. They're not living life. They're just living in life. And so observing things around, I've noticed it in business. So the other part of that is reacting. Once you've observed a problem, react to it. Do something about it. Okay, I've got an idea. Okay, what are you going to do about it? Well, 9 times out of 10, or maybe it's like 99 out of 100, people don't do anything with their ideas, and their really cool ideas die. That's sad for a lot of reasons. One is they might have had like a really cool entrepreneurial spirit that could have been flexed, but they didn't do it for a handful of fearful reasons. But the number 2 is how many unique, we live in a world, think about the vaccines that are out with COVID. Think about, like I was at the symphony over the weekend and they were talking about how they're doing orchestra work around dementia patients.
Wow.
Old people losing their minds. And plug on that, like my grandma who had Alzheimer's was able to play the accordion and she couldn't remember anybody in the room.
Wow.
But she could still remember songs. So there's something to that. But that's science. That's entrepreneurial spirit playing itself out in all these different ways. And that comes from people who are observing a problem and being willing to react to that problem. And history tells us that the people who can do those 2 things really well are the successful people. And not by successful by money. They're the ones who change history. Electricity happened because somebody observed a problem and reacted to it. And so that's that. Like I just think like that's how the world really operates in pushing ourselves forward. As we observe problems, we observe things that are happening, and we react to them. We solve problems. We are willing to move into finding solutions around that. So like one funny example would be I remember I was sitting. We were talking to one of our factories in China. This was in December of 2019. Okay, so everybody listening to this remembers the COVID crap, but like pre-COVID, this is December 2019.
Like
a
right
factory
before.
in China,
Yeah.
a factory in China of ours was telling, this is a connection of ours, was saying, hey, heads up, we've got a bunch of people sick here. I didn't know where this was in relation to the Wuhan and everything else,
Right.
but they happen to be in the area. And so I'm talking to this guy. His name's Kevin. Well, his real name's not Kevin, but that's what he's called himself. So Kevin and I are talking, and he's sharing with me, hey, like actually lots of factories. In fact, the government's starting to get involved over here. Heads up, things are going to start slowing down because we can't produce our stuff because our factories are getting shut down. And I was like, what is going on? So I did my own research, and there had been a couple like kind of like, hey, this big virus is starting to come out of control. And I was like, interesting. And I thought, this is my observation, okay, Asia is starting to be concerned. How long before that hits the U.S.? And I was seeing all of the call for action around the masking and all that. So that was happening well before it got popular here. And so I thought, you know what? United States is going to end up in a mask mandate.
You actually thought that?
Oh, yeah.
That's incredible.
And I had thought about that. And the other part of me being an entrepreneur is I knew I was not the only one thinking about this in December of 2019. Even though nothing had come here, I'm smart enough to know there are way smarter people than me out there who had already seen it, observed, and were thinking about it, and probably had frickin' masks on the boats headed this way. And so I knew there were container loads of masks heading this way already. I knew it. I couldn't prove it, but I knew it. This goes back to the entrepreneur thing, right? So, but I thought, you know what? I bet you what nobody is thinking through right now are kids' masks. So I thought this is, and there are people that they're in my sphere who can validate this story. I started thinking through like, what if we came up with like Princess and trucks and like, kids kind of fabric style N95 masks. This is before we knew what kind of mask you even needed.
Right.
And so I created a URL. I created an entity, an LLC. Our website's called, I don't even think it's live anymore, but Munchkin Masks was the name. Okay, I'm just getting that out there right now. That was the thing. And we created, I think we had 12 SKUs, 12 different products. They were just kids' masks. That's all it was. And I was betting, this is now January, in January-ish timeframe, I was betting that we were going to end up in a mask mandate in the States.
Wow.
And I had found
Serious
a supplier.
Foresight.
I found a supplier in China, and I ramped up, and they had several thousand units. I had paid for the first half of it. They had started to produce them, and they needed the second half of this thing. And I remember it was March, I want to say it was like March 5th or something like that of 2020. So fast forward about a month and a half. We had samples flown here to check and see. That's what you do in the world of manufacturing. You know, had some samples and they all looked good. We're like ready to go. We had my graphic designer had put together the site. Everything looked good. We built it on Amazon. We had Amazon listings built out. We were like prepped. And everybody here told me nobody is going to wear masks in the United States. Nobody will wear masks, Scott. You're a Looney Tune. If you think, maybe in Asia because they're used to that. But no one, right. The government forcing everyone to wear masks. Like,
funny to think about it now, right?
Right, exactly. So, but like back then, like nobody thought like that was gonna be a mandate. Right. How dare you tell me in my, second, my right to bear arms that I'm gonna have to put a freaking mask on. And so, so this happened. Money was kind of tight in March, early in March, and I was like, should we do it? I think it was like $15,000 or something like that, which was going to produce a lot of masks because this is China. You can fabric. You can make it really cheap. And so I had this thing come in, and I just had a series of people around me. I don't want to name names, but like people around me that were closest to me that I really trusted to get their input. I asked them, like, all right, we're here. Like everyone's telling me no. What do you think? And they were like, no, you shouldn't do it. No, you shouldn't do it. No, you shouldn't do it. And I had so many, and I had just gone on vacation. And I can't remember the day this happened, but there's a marker. It was the day before the stock market absolutely pummeled in that March of 2020. I can't remember that day, whatever that was. It just absolutely tanked. The day before, I had canceled the order, and I decided I'm not going to bring them in. And then fast forward 2 or 3 months later, and your mandates start to come down,
punching yourself in the face.
And now like we run in the world of Amazon, and so we can see how these face mask listings, their sell through. We can tell the velocity of units being sold. And we're looking at this, and they're just flying off the shelf. And there's nobody. There's still. I mean, to this day, there's still very few of the kids. But we had such a unique little thing that we had built that
would have worked.
Like I'm fairly sure that I goofed up on like a multi-million-dollar opportunity.
But you probably would have just gambled that all away anyway.
That's probably true. I would have lost it down the road anyways. But the point is, I observed a problem and I was reacting to it. Now I was unwilling to make that final call, and that's a good example of like, hey, you see a problem. I'm going to take the thing all the way to the end and then not do it. And like, those are really painful for me. So I've just decided in the world that I operate and live, I'm going to observe and react and be willing to go all the way through.
I love it. So, that's the type of entrepreneur you are. Because it seems like you do like a bunch of different stuff. Can you like give a overview of Scott the entrepreneur, since we've talked about Scott and all these other ways?
Yeah. On the business side, we do a few things. We do, and I say we because I have a great team. Some that's even recording right now. I want to make sure. Are we still good on recording?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Love it.
That's Sam there. I have a really good team that helps with this, but we do.
Yeah, we're in Scott's podcast studio.
Yeah, we call
which
this
is why this is new.
We call this the vault because it's an old empty bank vault. So, anyways.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, this is really classy. Really smart. So the vault here, but so we sell stuff on Amazon primarily. A lot of people don't know when you purchase on Amazon, it's usually, well, not usually, but a good chunk of the product on Amazon comes from what's called third-party sellers, which is I buy from somebody else and I put it on Amazon. You buy it on Amazon like anywhere else. Like you don't know the difference, but it's actually funded by a bunch of usually small businesses like myself. And so we sell a bunch of stuff that's done through wholesale. It's done through liquidation. Those are different models. We have our own private label brands. And so like one example of that would be Rincon Outdoor. Rincon stands for corner. That's a hammock company currently. It's going to expand kind of in the future as we build this thing out. But we're going, like, that's a good example of identifying a niche and then trying to build what I call as a sales moat around that niche. So, like, how do you protect yourself in the world of consumer products today? That, like, we'll get there in a second. But there's private label there. We do something called OTT, which is over the top. It's demand-side platform-based digital marketing. So if you pull up YouTube and you want to watch a video, like this would be the pre-roll types of videos that you'd see. That YouTube's just an example, but like anything you watch where you have to watch a 15 or 30-second ad in advance, we do that. Currently, we're doing that for a lot of political candidates. I despise that world for a lot of reasons because of how ingrained it is. we're heading into November 8th, which is the election cycle every 2 years. We're November 7th recording today, and everybody's blowing up my phone wondering how their ads are doing. And so that kind of world is just, it's kind of disgusting, but whatever. We know how to do it.
It's part of it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, people don't realize today, like, with the right data, you could target anybody. So, like, Kraft Cheese did a study with Kroger. So locally, we have Fred Meyer's here, which is owned by Kroger. And they studied customers in the aisle checking out with Kraft cheese. And anytime a Kraft UPC was scanned, there was a camera from Kroger that was studying the biomechanics of the person that was checking out, plus the card that was read to identify basically who is buying Kraft cheese. How's that for a study?
Whoa.
So then if you wanted to go target
Seems intrusive.
people buying, welcome to big data.
Yeah, I know.
If you want to target a potential Kraft cheese customer, you target that type of person that you built, that persona. So that's the kind of data that's out there today. So that's how that kind of stuff is like being it's kind of run rampant. It's like the big, deep, dark data stuff that you hear like Jason was talking about. Actually, guys that Jason grew up with and operate around, that's the kind of world that they live in. So
it's the whole, you just say something, you talk about having frozen yogurt.
Yeah.
And then like later on your Instagram shows you a frozen yogurt ad, and it's like
totally. I mean, so like this is just a random example, and I don't know, maybe this happens, but like you could build an AI platform that scrapes podcasts much like this one for key terms and start to build demographics and data based on that and sell it to people.
It's crazy.
Monetizing data upon data upon data I mean, it's just the world is kind of never ending. So we operate in that world in digital marketing. I know. Yeah, it is. Usually don't go that complex because we're not that complex, but that's the kind of data that's there. And then, I mean, this is like an example. Like we're kind of teasing out this process of what could you do with a podcast studio, and like, I don't know, we kind of do some stuff there. And then I do a lot of, I work with a lot of local businesses to help them with just their overall brand strategies. Are they actually reaching the customers that they're after? Are they really are they represented well online? How are they? What's their brand ethos? And that's kind of through some personal consulting work. But mostly we sell stuff online. I would say like the majority of our revenue stream is predicated on selling stuff online.
What excites you about doing the work that you do?
I hate stuff. So I don't know. Like I'm so stuffed out when and I don't know how many of the people that watch this or listen to this who've been in the e-commerce space, like most of us are like, stuff. I don't care about stuff anymore. We're just like, you see the worst of the consumer-minded world that we live in when you live in e-commerce land. Like, it sucks. But what excites me
about entrepreneurship.
When I mean,
because you're obviously like you get passionate about it, right?
Yeah, it's the idea of seeing something come to life.
Yeah.
Right? Like when you can create something from nothing, that's pretty exciting. And so if you've got a creative bent, which I do, and kind of I'm kind of a weird hybrid, but like the creative side of me wants to see stuff come to life.
Yeah.
So that's what excites me. I would say more than anything.
What would you say to people like me around my age who we hear this being an entrepreneur is so sexy, right? Like everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, and like I want to be an entrepreneur, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But what type of advice would you give someone who's like, I want to go down this route and not take the ordinary path in business and I'm not just going to get a desk job or whatever, which there's nothing wrong with that. Everyone has their different thing. What would you say to those people, both how they should differentiate themselves and the things they can do to help themselves, but also maybe things like, hey, this is maybe harder than you think?
Yeah, I mean, we
live
in a land of side hustle, so everybody has a side hustle, it seems like these days, doing something, right? So you kind of get a chance to like feel that no matter who you are. Like a lot of people can just go out and do that and they're fine with their desk jobs. But for the ones who want to be like, no, that's like full-time what I want to do, I would say the first thing is be realistic. You do not probably have the majority of tools necessary to have a sustainable entrepreneurial career in front of you without really being willing to humble yourself and learn. And that often means, like, I would say like Lucky Bird, one of the entities that runs through here, is a good example of that. Like the guys and gals that have come through this operation, and many of them have gone on to do cool things, they learned the real mechanics of startup life. And like, what does it actually take to make a sustainable startup grow?
Yeah.
And like there's a difference between small business and startup. Do you know that? Like a small business is like, we're going to keep it small and it's going to be this little, it grows.
Startup is like,
yeah, I mean, it grows, but it kind of grows at a like sustainable kind of small, in the tens kinds of growth. And startup is designed to be explosive.
Yeah.
And so there's really a difference. When people say startups, they don't necessarily always mean like we're going to be nothing and we're going to go to multi-million dollars. Like that's a true startup. Mm-hmm. A small business is like, I'm going to start something and we're going to keep it like 2 employees and it's not going to go anywhere.
That makes sense.
We've rode the line a little bit on both of those, but so it depends a little bit on like what you want out of being an entrepreneur, but it's really scary. Like, I don't know if you felt this, but like, the more you step into being a legit entrepreneur where you don't have the strings of a big corporate entity and a paycheck every 2 weeks, when you're really singing for your breakfast, it's pretty scary.
Totally.
And so my advice to those individuals who are willing to step out into the I'm really going to go do it on my own is to find people that you trust to do it with. Like, there's no reason to be an entrepreneur solo. Like, some of the most disastrous things I've done have been because I did it on my own. I didn't have to. There's lots of cool people doing really cool things. And if you're fresh into being an entrepreneur, what I'd probably recommend is go work for somebody who's doing that.
Yeah.
Go be an entrepreneur in a sense. Maybe you get a paycheck, but you work in a fully entrepreneurial space where you get to see the life of the chaoticness that wraps around typically a true startup in that entrepreneurial spirit.
I remember Gary Vee having that advice. So I listened to one of his videos. It was similar. It wasn't exactly the same, but it was
that guy's got like 8 trillion minutes of audio that you could probably peel out of. So it doesn't surprise me he'd say that, but it's true.
But so I remember it stuck out in my brain because like you learn from the people around you instead of just trying to go at it solo. Like you're some sort of genius.
You and I don't know anything outside of what we've learned. This goes back to the early childhood. We're blank slates. Well, it's the same when you become an entrepreneur. You don't know jack.
Yeah.
You have things you think about, but you don't know until you try them.
Right.
But you can learn through watching other people. That's how we all, none of us arrived overnight. None of the bigwigs got there on their own. We like to like deify the Bezos or like, Tim Ferriss we brought up earlier or, Joe Rogan. He's kind of the podcast god, right?
Guy,
it's like God, not even guy. Like we deify Joe Rogan.
Oh, totally.
Anytime you talk about a podcast, it's like, this is what Joe Rogan does. You're like, okay, but I'm not going to be Joe Rogan. Like I'm not Barstool. Sorry, right?
Yeah.
And so, but those guys, they didn't get there on their own.
No.
They have phenomenal producers, great marketers, great content guys. The guests on the shows have made it worthwhile. There's so much contribution.
100%.
But they also had to learn that stuff by doing it and being around other people. Most of those guys, that fractional people that are successful, some luck, but a lot of listening and paying attention to other people around them. So learn. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, don't step into it like you've got the next greatest thing. You're going to shut down every entrepreneur who actually wants to help you by walking in and going, guys, look what I have to say here. You're like, we'll see at the bottom, dog. Like it just doesn't work that way. And I'd say I've had to learn that a lot too.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's been a lot of people locally here in Spokane that have paved that path for me, who kind of like looked at my stuff early on and was like, okay, Joker. And they were right.
Yeah.
I treaded water or I failed at these things. They didn't go anywhere. And it wasn't until I started looking at, well, what's working and why are they working and how is it working? And, kind of going through my own personal stuff, like having to unwind some of my own crap internally. Now I feel like I'm ready to like step into this like high scale, let's go.
What's that look like? That was kind of my next, like, where do you see, this is such a hard question.
Yeah.
But right now, where do you see yourself going?
Yeah.
Let's start with like entrepreneurially.
So I just think that there's different types of entrepreneurs, and they're kind of bent for different sections of a startup. You have like your dreamers, like real early on thinkers that are like, I got an idea, but they don't know how to actually get something off the ground. That's one section. There's another section which is, I got the idea. I'm going to go build an MVP, a minimum viable product. I kind of just pilot this thing out. I'm going to get it up and off the ground. I'm going to show real revenue. I'm going to get it to a point where it needs now infrastructure and the kind of foundational efforts to get it to the next phase beyond that. That's a section. And then you've got this like, I'll call it like post-revenue. It's already going, and they're building a machine from there.
Yeah.
They're the machine guys.
Yeah.
I'm the middle one.
Gotcha.
Maybe a little early in, but like I could sit with somebody who has an idea And they're like, I have an idea. Would you do something with it? And I'll go, yes, I can. And I will take something from
You act.
Some idea. I'm observing their idea, validating it a little bit, and I'm reacting in the sense of I'm building it out to a place where I can hand it off to somebody who's got the machine skills to take the thing to the next level. And I think that probably looks like pre-rev in the world of like kind of startup money. It looks like pre-rev to like early foundation, like probably like I'm out at a Series A. I just don't think I've got the organizational skills, currently at least, to be able to conceptually build out an org chart that's necessary to scale something from a couple $1 million to a couple $100 million.
Do you want to?
I also don't want to.
I mean, that's a big thing,
That's a great,
right?
Yeah, that's a great call. I don't really want to be that guy.
Yeah.
Like, I like being in the weeds and getting out and coming back. You know, this like kind of hybrid. The best entrepreneurs that I've met are really good at getting in the weeds and then going back out to the clouds. And like, there's this ratio that I've noticed is necessary for each phase of the business. And the 50-50 guy is that kind of middle person. And that's kind of where I like to be. Like the early guy is the one in the weeds. Like he's so stuck and fixated on all the details. That's why he'll never get it off the ground.
Yeah.
He's your classic tinkerer.
Yeah.
He's the guy in the shop building things but doesn't know how to scale anything.
Yeah, I can get stuck like that. I have to fight that.
Well, that guy's never
myself.
going anywhere in life until the next guy comes in who's able to come out and go into the clouds a little bit.
How do you go from, because I think there's people that have natural bends to any of those things that you talk about.
Yeah.
So let's say for me, I would say I'm probably more of the first in a natural way. Sure. How do you go from that to actually building something out? Like what do you need to do to, whether it's like actual practical things or mental things to get past a barrier to actually go forward? Because I think a lot of those people, I'll speak for myself, it's just like fear of, it's why it took me so long to do this podcast. I wanted to do this for years.
Yeah.
And like my brother and my mom had to basically force me, even though it was so in my heart to want to do, because I was afraid of people's opinions.
Yeah. Know yourself. I think that's the most important part is like, you just have to know yourself. Learn who you actually are in that world and be okay with that position. Because in every one of those kind of phases of individual, even like you're saying you're like scared to, like my advice to you personally, because that's like advice one-on-one to an entrepreneur is going to look different one-on-one. Totally. You just need somebody to do it with you. Probably.
Yep.
Like it would just be helpful to have a person to lean on a little bit as you move forward. That probably would help you eliminate some of those fears of doing. But you're a doer. At the end of the day, we're sitting here because you're doing something. Yeah. So you're not just the tinkerer.
No. But I had to drag myself to be the doer.
And that's true of that group. But I just think the tinkerer oftentimes maybe is not meant for that next phase no matter what. And what they need to be worried about or thinking about is how do I create a royalty from my idea so that somebody else can go do it. Totally. And I'm going to make my money by tinkering. I'm going to go tinker into another thing. And they're good with that. And they just recognize that that's where they sit and live, because the things that matter to them most are quite literally from zero to something. They love that space. They just love it. And that's fine, because those people are needed.
Yeah.
But that person is not the same as the machine builder over here at $200 million who's going to hire 100 people and build out an organization. They're not the same individual. They don't think the same. So recognizing where you sit and being honest with yourself early on, it took me a lot of years to figure out, like, well, I actually think I've always known I'm kind of this person, but I've had to lie to myself along the way and go, actually, I could build something, and then I fail at building an organization. Or I'm the tinkerer, and I get so distracted before I can even sit down and create something out of nothing that I'd never actually create anything. I'm this guy. This is who I am.
So what does a ideal professional life look like to you? Like an entrepreneurial, what is like, you feel like you would wake up in the morning, and maybe you already feel this way. Maybe it's this. And you'd be excited and filled with purpose and wonder to go attack the day. What does that look like?
I have found stop doing things I don't want to do, and to be okay with that. Like you always have to do things you don't want to do. Yeah. That's kind of true of life. But there are things in your day that, like, once you figure out what you like to do and you lean into that, the opportunities will kind of continue to unlock as you walk down that road. And so there has not been, for most parts, like there's been stressful things in my day, but for the better part, at least of the last year, even in some really terrible times of like, what's happening? Like, am I going to go bankrupt? Are we going to make it? What's happening? I haven't hated coming to work.
Good. Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
that's like kind of my litmus test personally is like, do I despise? Somebody said call it the Monday mornings. You know, like they're like, oh crap, I'm gonna have to go to work. I don't. I really enjoy what I do, and you just have to work that out. I can't tell anybody else what that is. For me,
be honest with yourself about what you like and go down
you gotta spend time. And sometimes that's by process of doing and elimination. I've learned a lot of things about what I don't want to do.
I mean, that's just been a theme in this, right? You have to act.
I'm actually different in the sense like a lot of people are like, oh yeah, work from home is like the way I want to be. Okay, fine, whatever. I personally don't think you're very efficient at home, despite what everybody thinks. Like, I don't believe that.
Yeah.
I just love going into something. Like, it's like part of my routine is waking up and getting ready to walk out the door. It's the same thing of like I'm driving to a place to go do a thing.
Absolutely.
It's like, I don't know. There's something to it. Like showing up somewhere requires a mental decision in my head that I'm going to go contribute to something. It also allows me to leave it.
Yeah.
I've talked to a lot of people lately, especially post-COVID, who are anxiously burnt out because they didn't know how to check work from home. It's all kind of been this intermingled thing all of a sudden. And I did that early on in being an entrepreneur too. Everything was just, I was always on. And I was putting in like 80, 100 hours a week. I mean, I was just like living in the startup space. That's so unhealthy.
Oh, yeah.
You can never shut it off. You can't be present with anybody else. I'm only as good as healthy as I am, and that means that I have to be able to leave my work where I'm leaving it. And so driving somewhere, when I drive away, I put it down.
I love it.
Which is really rare for me. So, and I'm done at 4:30. Usually, like 4:30, maybe 5 if I'm pushing it. I'm done. I go home.
Family time.
Yeah, man, and the rest of life comes after that. And so I just, I'm compartmentalizing in a sense, but it's like a healthier version of what I was doing
that's a way
before.
healthier version.
Yeah.
So then I guess that leads to what does an ideal personal family life for Scott look like? Like, you talked about all these things you struggled with and all you've overcome in this journey that you're on. That's in retrospect, it's like you're earlier on in this like discovery of yourself or this new discovery of yourself, this new journey.
Yeah.
What does I don't want to use the word ideal. What does a joyful, peaceful family life look like for you? Where do you want to get to?
Yeah, it involves, I would say, like, I'm probably still a little bit in the question mark to that. Like, how is that going to look? But I will say, I was telling my wife this the other day, like, I feel like most of my life today revolves around recovery.
Yeah.
Because to me, most solutions kind of stem from that, of like being aware, like being present, being aware, like, what am I experiencing? What am I feeling? My body is keeping score of the things that are happening when I'm tense, when I'm struggling, I know pains that are developing. It's like just being present is like where it starts for me. And so with my family, like I have 4 young kids, 6, 5, 3, and 1.
That's a busy house.
Family. My beautiful wife, she's 32. And so we're busy. Like,
that's a lot.
We're busy on that, but like, life is just really, I walk in the door and I get tackled.
Yeah, exactly.
Like my kids are like wrestle time. Like we have games that were like designed in my house that are like designed for like WWF, or whatever that is. Yeah. Like the wrestle game is the real thing.
Me and my little brother used to do it all the time. He loved it.
Yeah, we have something called the garbage game where like I determine the piece of garbage is my child, whatever, and they're like recycle or I can reuse it or like it's actual trash.
I love it.
And I toss them, like those kinds of things. And so I know that I have to show up with some energy at my house at 5 o'clock when I come home, which means that I can't deplete myself as hard as I need to during the day, which means I have to be aware of myself. Yep. So starting my morning, I wake up in the morning and I get in the Bible because it starts my day getting outside of myself. It's thinking like, how do I need to live my life today? And I tell people like sobriety today. Like for me, being sober, I have to be sober today and decide that I'm going to do that today. If I think outside that, it doesn't help me. I have to deal with it today. And so I wake up with that mentality, whatever that looks like. I drink a nice cup of coffee, and I try to do it in peace because I got up before my kids. Lately, it feels like my kids freaking time change zones and stuff. My kids are just disasters. So whatever. I light a fire. We have a fireplace at home.
Oh,
and
that's
some
a huge one.
ambiance
Yeah,
kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So there's
creating
serenity.
the atmosphere.
Yeah,
that's huge.
There's serenity in my morning ambiance. Then this is another thing. I get in the shower, and I have a routine in the shower. It's kind of weird. It's another thing that I did this last year that was new. I pull up an app. It's called Ask Pastor John. So it's a plug for that. It could be anything for you, like if you're a Buddhist Zen guy, like whatever it is for you. But like that's my thing. And he's just got it's just a topical thing. He's a pastor, really well-known pastor, John Piper, and he's just addressing topical things, questions that get brought in, and he always points back to scripture. But they're usually like 6 to 10 minutes long, perfect for a shower. And I just think about a new topic. It's kind of like my way of learning, kind of like in the entrepreneurial land where you can learn something new. I'm just learning and thinking about a spiritual practice for me, usually in that, and I do it every morning. These
habits are so important.
As a habit, it's a routine. And then I get out the door, and so I'm like, I just have this like, my morning starts this way. If my day gets out of hand during the day, I go to a meeting, Zoom online. What I mean by that is a 12-step meeting. There's apps out there that allow you to join a 12-step meeting virtually every 5 minutes.
Interesting.
I mean, I was on one the other day. This is Bozos on the Bus in Hong Kong. I joined a 12-step meeting in Hong Kong.
Wow.
Because they were having one, and it's on Zoom. So, and it's full of people from all over the world. And so, like, the reason I do that, though, is those 12-step meetings slow me down. They force me to go inward. They force me to think about what I'm doing. And, like, I'm an angry individual, actually. Like, I'm really, like, sociable. But, like, the things I really struggle with, like, my demons are anger. Like, I have a lot of anger, and it's unaddressed anger. And the angry thing of me is actually, that's a secondary thing. It's like dashboard lights going off. Like, you're angry. What is it? Well, it's usually something I'm fearful, I'm anxious, I'm frustrated at something, whatever those things are. And by showing up to a 12-step meeting, it allows me to stop and slow down and go, okay, like this is what's going on.
Very interesting.
And then lately, I've also adopted breathing routines. So I have an app that I do. It's 10 minutes, and it's just a breathing. Yeah, I know. I know you mentioned that with Jason. Yeah. Like, I don't sit in ice, but actually...
the breathing is huge, though.
But the breathing is huge. I know.
Huge.
That guy's legit, by the way.
Oh, man.
Like, I just want to, I feel like his skin must be leather or something based on, I don't know.
I see my, future life. I'm like, I see it like this. Like, I'm going to get it before my kids. I'm going to...
Yeah, bro.
Ice bath. But
yeah, I mean, like, seriously, I think you,
extreme.
for your podcast, having Hoff on your podcast... up there. That might be the best. Anyways.
That would be up there for
sure.
So
routine is so important, and that's how I create time for my kids. For the time that matters.
For sure.
I schedule in stuff that matters. I don't leave my day up for grabs. Like when you leave your day up for grabs, like, what are you doing this weekend? Oh, I don't know.
Well, you're so screwed because then all this other stuff fills it.
You've got 5 actual slots to your day, and you've got 10 coins. What are you going to fill it with? And if you don't tell which coin is going into the slot, someone else is going to do it, or something else is going to do it for you.
It's probably the worst coin. Like, it's not going to be a good one.
So much time.
So much time.
Yeah. So like that's going back to just generally successful people. Is they're generally healthy simply because they're deciding how their day is going to look, and that's something that more recently I've decided. I have not done that historically, but I've been on that side of chaos now moving into
and you
discipline.
Can see the two. Oh, it's a huge difference.
It's night and day. I probably wouldn't have sat down with you. I wouldn't have been able to sit down with you and share those things with you in podcast form had I not gone through them recently myself. So.
Interesting. I love it.
That's a lot, dude. We're pushing 2 hours.
I know. I've got just two more questions.
Okay.
We'll wrap it.
Okay.
There's a question I'm testing.
Okay.
Because I think it's really interesting. My girlfriend actually asked me it the other day, and I wrote it down. I was like, I'm going to test that with Scott because I think it's an interesting question and where people's brain goes.
Yeah,
so
sure.
The question is, if you could share one memory, let's say with your 6-year-old.
Sure.
One memory, or let's say with your 6-year-old, but they could feel and experience that memory as if they were you. And this can be an older kid too, like something you want to pass on to your kids. What would the one memory you choose be? And remember, they can feel it. And the reason I asked this, because when she asked me, I really was like, oh man, that can unlock a lot of different things on why would we choose a memory?
Sure.
So for instance, the first one that came to my mind wasn't this like joyful memory. It was this memory where I felt in first year in Barcelona, I felt like just fully overwhelmed with like anxiety and the fact that I wasn't like, I was in this foreign land and I was just completely out of control. And then I walked outside to take the trash out, and this overwhelming peace, like, just, it felt like the presence of God just like just completely came on me. And I just remember looking to the stars and thinking the creator of the universe loves me.
Yeah, wow.
Taking out the trash. and I chose that because I was like, I would want my kid to feel that, to know that if you're in the deepest darkness of your soul, that there is this hope for you. So
yeah, wow, that's deep. It's a good question too. Yeah, I'd say
it's a tough one too.
Well, because it just might depend on under what circumstance.
Yeah,
so like,
totally.
What I'd probably say, like, because there's highs and lows. A low, I would say, like a point like that, I would want my kids to know, simply because this is what it feels like to be powerless, would be the night that I got caught. And this was December 1st of 2021. And without going into too much detail, like, somebody came over, and it wasn't I didn't know my wife had left because I was in another room. And she had left and gone over to somebody's house and like told them like what she had discovered. And this guy came to my house and was knocking on my door at like 10 o'clock in the morning or at night. And I was like, "Who the heck's knocking on my door?" And I was all irritated. I was also drunk, or I should actually. I for the intents and purposes, I definitely had several drinks.
Yeah.
And he said like, "Hey," and seeing him at the front door, he's like, "Hey, like, your wife found these things." And it was like a Twilight Zone, like literally, like my vision was leaving me, and I had to say goodbye. He's like, and hey, you need to get out tonight. You need to leave so she can come home. And I walked upstairs and I walked into my room and I kissed my I have 4 kids, but the 3 of them are living in. The 3 of them are in a room, and I was kissing them as they were sleeping. Looking at their foreheads, kissing their foreheads as they peacefully slept. And I had to say goodbye to my kids. I wasn't sure if I'd ever see them again. Because I knew, like, as soon as it hit me, it was like, the gig's up. It's kind of like how it felt. And I was driving out of our driveway. We have a long driveway. We live out on 15 acres, beautiful property. But I'm driving down the road, and I let out the most blood-curdling, almost demonic scream I've ever done to this day. I've never yelled as hard, as girthy. It was just this,
pure.
And I was just, and I was saying no, as loud as I could. No, because I was feeling my life implode on me, even though it had already it was overdue.
Yeah.
I was finally there,
but it was
and it
culmination.
Exactly. It was a culmination of powerlessness coming to life, and me feeling it. And I would share it for my kids because I would want them to know what that feels like so they wouldn't have to go through it.
Yeah.
Because it sucks. And then probably on like the side of joy that I wish my family would be, and granted, like I said, I went to Uganda under the wrong pretext. But there was something really, lots of special memories in that for me. When I was driving out to this middle of nowhere, Bujiri district is the area, but it was often off like roads that are not really roads, out in the middle of nowhere. We stopped before we showed up to this little orphanage, and there's like 20 kids out there at this orphanage, and the guy said, "Why don't you pop up through there's a van, but why don't you pop up through this little Toyota van and stick your head out so you can, we can drive up, the kids can see you." And off in the distance as we drive up, you hear this, they got it, and they're cheering.
Amazing.
Because somebody is coming.
Yeah, for sure.
Somebody's coming. I felt like, this, and I don't say this in an ego sense, but it was almost like I imagine what it would have been like to see Jesus coming. That was how they were like perceiving this jacked up, stupid, white guy who was there for the wrong reasons. Right. I did have a desire to help, but I was messed up. Anyways, as I'm pulling up, and there's just this joy. I've never seen this joy before. At just somebody showing up.
Oh, it's so good.
And I actually have it on camera.
Oh.
So I caught it. I caught it with my GoPro. And it is the most special moment you can imagine of joy.
Oh, so you can, I mean, they can't
I can
necessarily
actually
feel it, but
share
you can
this
kind
one
of share
because
the memory.
it's so
How
good.
cool.
It's so good. But just this like cheering joy, and they just like, it's so jacked. I mean, you would have thought somebody drove, in a modern day, somebody shows up in a Lamborghini to come give it to you. And you're just like, like that kind of like overwhelming, no way, and I mean, that's a bad example, but like, like something just like so absurd, and it was just me showing up in a van. They didn't know what I had or what I was, they just were excited I was there.
That's so
and
cool.
I want my kids to feel that kind of joy without stuff.
Yes, it's the real, like, it's such a perfect, like, metaphor for what matters in life.
Felt hope.
Yes,
and I
so
think
good.
they felt hope for maybe perhaps some of the first times ever.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Those are two great ones. Well, Scott, any parting words for the audience? Or maybe we'll wrap it with that because that was pretty good.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm grateful. Thanks for having me on the show. I really feel like I'm small potatoes compared to the people you're bringing on here.
No,
so,
this was amazing. Not
yeah.
small potatoes at all. That was one of the best, most vulnerable conversations I'm sure everyone got just so much out of it. So thank you. Thank you for who you are and your story. And I'm just grateful to know you.
You're welcome, bud.
Awesome.